Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, depending on where you are currently located. So I want to start out today by saying that wanted to introduce you to the water and watersheds module just quickly. I've been having some trouble with my lecture uploads. I'm trying to fix that. Those should be in place later today. First, so Kyla says she can't hear anyone. Is anyone else having that problem? Can't hear me, I suppose. If you can hear me, can you, okay, some people can hear. So Kyla, can you just check your microphone? And I mean your speakers, rather, make sure that your speakers are on. And if that doesn't work, you can actually leave the video on and you can use the phone number to call in for audio. So that solution, that workaround works too. So there's a phone number on the Blackboard site along with the Zoom link. If it might not be there this week. Okay, Kyla's all right. Okay, good. So basically, this module and the next couple, I'm trying to direct the lectures towards stuff that's going to be useful to you in your final project. So that's the intention of the lectures and the readings that that are in the water and watersheds module. And the readings are up there, and the documents that I refer to in the lecture are up there. It's just I won't have the lectures up there until later on. Probably, I'm just realizing I have meetings this afternoon, but they'll be there tonight. So I just wanted to apologize for that, for not having them already loaded. I just couldn't overcome this problem. Where I want to focus class time today is on the group presentations. And so I am going to just make sure that the groups can share the screen. I'd like to see if we can keep, I want to have presentations and then some questions. I want to see if we can keep to 15 minutes a group so that people are able to do their presentations. So Hannah, do you have your hand up? For Hannah Lawrence? No, it's okay. It wasn't Hannah DeBoer. It was Hannah Lawrence. And there was this little hand. Oh, no, it's my little hand. Man. So group one, which is Peyton. Maybe I should look this up. But Peyton, I'm going to turn the hosting over to you and your group. Well, not the hosting exactly, but if you guys could start your scenario presentation, I would like to give you more. Okay.
Do you want us to pull up our Google Doc that has the scenarios that we wrote on it?
Yeah. Well, however you decided you were going to do it, if the Google Doc works best for you.
Sure.
And then I would hope that when you're presenting that you'll let us see your faces.
Yeah, sure. Let me just try and share my screen here with you guys. Can you guys see that? Yeah, awesome. Okay, now how do I go back to Zoom? Hi guys. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Peyton, and also in my group is Isabel and Ashley, who I hope can hear and see me as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to Zoom and I can't figure out how to do that. Oh, there we go. So Isabel, do you want to start us off? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the source that we used. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Sorry, guys, some technological issues.
I'm gonna mute myself, but technological issues are ever present.
Yeah, it's definitely the theme of the year.
Yeah.
Ashley, are you there too?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Okay.
Should we all put on our cameras or should we wait until it's our turn?
Can you just put on your cameras, please?
Okay. Hello.
Isabel, you're muted still.
Hello. Sorry, it's just taking me a second to pull it up.
If
Peyton,
you want,
your
you can read.
Is your power on?
No, not yet. It's been like 2 or 3 days now that I haven't had power, so I'm using my data.
Wow.
Yeah, my data bill is gonna be really big this month. Do you want to read off the screen that I shared, Isabel?
It's just loading now, sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so the resource that we used was Climate Trends and Projections for Dominica, Skeena, Northeast Natural Resource Regions in British Columbia. And it's just like a government BC document that was put together. And we focused on the Dominica region, which is encompassing Prince George. And we then focused on just Prince George, not the whole area, just to make it a little more easier for us. And it talked about trends in temperature rise and seasonal changes that will occur, such as less snowfall, less precipitation falling as snowfall and more falling as rain during the year, as well as an overall increase of around 3.5 degrees Celsius to 3.8 degrees Celsius overall in the area. And then now I'll move on to the thing that I wrote. Sorry, just hold on 1 second. So my story is in the form of like a letter between a daughter and father. So I'll just read it. So it says, "Dear Father, today marks the first day of 2050. How things have changed on Earth since you left for your space mission 30 years ago. I look forward to getting to send you this yearly update every year. Me and my 2 pups are still doing good, still living in Prince George. However, I try and work remotely for at least 3 to 4 months a year just to get a change of scenery. Haven't been doing too much field work this year, mainly just working in the lab. I know you are waiting to get your yearly science/research update. Thankfully for you, I've been continuing my research here at the UNPC lab. We are currently focusing on changes that occurred since 2020. I was wondering if you and your society would also like to partake in this research. Maybe compare our changes to yours, just let me know. Anyways, I'll give you the rundown on what we have so far. Since 2020, summers still remain our warmest season, but we also experience an annual temperature change of 3.5 degrees Celsius. This increase has increased our number of growing days in Prince George, which has allowed us to produce more of our produce at a local level, helping the local economy strive. This has forced some of the chain grocery stores to close and be taken over by local business owners, collaborating with the community. Some chain stores have decided to branch out and collaborate on a local level to keep up with the market. With more growing days comes a decrease of frost days, especially in the fall. Overall, precipitation has increased by 7% and occurs primarily as rain rather than snow. Although we still do experience snowfall, it occurs later into fall and leaves earlier in the spring. This causes snowpack levels to decrease. This has caused an increase of forest fires. A fire-resistant wall has been put around the perimeter of the city in hopes to decrease the amount of damage done to our city. This has been working so far. We do still experience some smoky days from the fires. We adjust by wearing masks and have also been doing 70% of our agriculture indoors. Technology is increasing every day and is making everyday life easier, but technology has also in some cases replaced jobs an actual person used to do to gain income to support their family. This has forced many people to go on unemployment due to lack of employment opportunities. Our society eats more plant-based and there is more hunting limitations put in place every year in hopes to preserve the wildlife. Anyways, I hope you're doing okay up there. Looking forward to your response. I know you probably haven't experienced many changes since you're not really exposed to the environment around you, but what technological advancements have you made? Any to do with agriculture? Have you noticed any changes to the other planets on your travels? Miss you, your daughter. And that's my story. And now I think it's Peyton.
Yeah. So Isabel wrote hers in the form of a letter, and then I wrote mine in the form of a diary entry taking place in 2050. So pretty much I'm writing this to myself in 2050. It starts off with, historically, the Umneka region was known for having harsh winters and cold temperatures throughout the fall and winter, but many these days laugh at such a statement and claim to be thankful to not have to experience the harsh conditions seen in previous years. It doesn't take a scientist or a meteorologist to tell us that the seasons have certainly changed a lot since my first years in the Umneka region. To be frank, I don't even recognize the community or the people in it anymore. It's no secret that we have much rainier days here and very dry winters as compared to the previous years. In fact, science has shown us that our region's precipitation levels have increased over 7% since the last study they did in 2008, which showed that there was an increase in precipitation of 20% in the previous years. I don't mind the rain much, but I do prefer the days that were bright and sunny but chilly. These days happened often many years ago. The crisp air was so refreshing. Now these conditions are few and far between. Although you may not notice on a regular day, the average temperature has increased by 3.5 degrees Celsius, which makes a large difference over time. The temperature increase impacts the local agriculture industry and the overall health of our forests by creating drier conditions that increase the risk of forest fires. Last year, I nearly lost all my land to a fire that started from a lightning strike in the nearby forest. As a result of the increased mean temperature, there has been 30% less snowfall, but as I previously said, the amount of rainfall has increased. There has been a significant increase in the number of frost-free days, and I must say, I enjoy not having to wake up so early to scrape off my car, but this does reflect the temperature increase that has been shown time and time again. A lot has changed in the last 30 years, and I worry for the future of my community. It seems that many people don't recognize the severity of the conditions we are experiencing. The decline in the forestry sector and the loss of our trade routes have left many unemployed and many more living on the streets. The air quality is very poor as a result of increased forest fires and leftover remnants from the old mills in town. People used to say the air quality in Prince George was bad. They should see it now. and that was the diary entry that I wrote. All three of us used the same article just for consistency in the statistics that we cited in our work. And I'll pass it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Peyton.
Yeah.
So I also decided to write my story as a letter. Mine is addressed to like an old friend. And in my letter, I discussed the last time that these two friends got to visit in person, which was in 2016. That's when our source was published, was in 2016. So I discuss what happened, like what is predicted in the report. And then I also wanted to tie in the pandemic and how that might change things. So January 1st, 2050. To my dearest friend, the new year has found me reflecting on our last in-person visit in 2016 during what feels like a different lifetime. I remember us sitting on your old porch in Prince George discussing what our careers may entail. If only we knew then some of the dramatic changes that would begin to occur in just 4 short years. Had we predicted the rise of the deadly COVID-19 virus, I imagine our predictions would have been a bit more accurate for what life is like today. I hope you might have chosen to stay in Canada if you could have anticipated the impending international border closures that resulted from the global pandemic. I've missed your company dearly in the 34 years since you moved across the globe. I will catch you up on what changes have occurred in Prince George since you've been gone. Since the year 2020, when the world began to shift with the spread of COVID-19, our community has seen a lot of change. Carbon emissions have lowered dramatically as a result of travel restrictions and decreased industrial activity. Neither of our cynical minds could have seen that change coming. While we both worried that the human population would continue to grow so rapidly that our planet could not keep up, a lateral change occurred due to increased mortality rates caused by the virus, but also increased birth rates because of our new quarantine lifestyle. I know you have been negatively affected by international border closures as you were forced to make a foreign country your long-term home. I thought you might want to hear about how the border closures have affected your former home. The city of Prince George has been forced to adjust to several huge changes as a result of COVID-19, but also changes in our climate. Food security has always been a concern for us here in the north, as you know. The pandemic causing borders to close was a nightmare when it first occurred. However, it forced our community to adapt, and our changing climate actually aided in the transition. With such a high demand for locally grown food, our local economy shifted to be predominantly focused on agriculture. The shift was made easier by a mean annual temperature increase of 3 degrees Celsius, an annual precipitation increase of 7%, and you'll love this part, a 10% decrease in snowfall, resulting in a longer growing season and shorter winter. This shift towards agriculture was made easier yet as our former leading industry, forestry, became less and less viable due to increased forest fires in our region. This spike in forest fires was a result of the increased mean annual temperature we've experienced, causing extremely dry conditions. I know you would love to see how agriculture has brought our community together. Homelessness is at an all-time low, as initiatives for shared living spaces where people work together to put food on a communal table have become a hit in Prince George. I believe this positive change was also brought on by the change in mindset we have seen since the pandemic. It has unified us as a community. I hope in the future we can meet again in person. Sincerely, your old friend. The end.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, you guys. Well, that's an interesting approach, using the same basic, the same one basic data and doing 3 versions on it. But you can see the differences in the story, whether in terms of how the community adapts and reacts. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, we
So-
kind of like looked at your notes and how you liked to do like a pessimistic scenario and then like a optimistic one. So we kind of took 3 different approaches to doing that, I think.
Yeah.
Was sort of the idea. Yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, let's hear from, so you got a way to go in the chat box here. I just want to point that out in case you have trouble tracking that. What I'd like to do is go to just go ahead and go to group 2. And then maybe we can have some discussion at the end. Group 2, do you know that you are group 2? Or do you want me to go look up your names? Well, I got no answer. So I'm going to have to log on over here. Or somebody should log on.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, that's us. I have us in our personal group as group 3, so that's my bad. So I hopefully
yes, that's you guys.
Yeah, that's us. Yeah,
okay.
For sure. Sorry
We
about
can
that.
Change these names and make them a little bit more.
Well, I logged on and looked because that's the dead silence. Yeah. Anyways, is our whole team here? I see Scott. I see Aaron. Some of us are here. Aaron, do you want to do our narration? I will just kind of give a little intro to what we did if you want to narrate.
Sounds great. Thanks, Patrick.
Sure.
Is someone gonna share a screen or are we listening?
Let's see if I can share a screen. I don't think Aaron, can you share a screen, or is it just your video that's not working?
I'm on my 7-year-old laptop. It is chugging along with the Zoom open. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I will. Can you see the document though? I'll share my screen here. I think this is it. I'm not sure. There's screen 2. I think this is the one.
And to the extent that you're able, can we also see your faces?
Sure.
You can, if you're worried about, too much private space or whatever, you can get a curtain like mine.
That's fine. I think I'm in the right document.
I would totally share my face, but I don't even have a webcam yet.
Wow.
I mean, I could describe myself. I'm wearing.
Yeah, that would be really
pajamas.
helpful.
I'm wearing pajama pants. Hold on, pajama pants.
You just gotta look good on top.
Yeah, I'm wearing a blue hoodie.
I'm
with blue
6'4".
And I'm wearing all blue. I'm even wearing blue socks. I'm very blue today.
Okay,
Yeah,
Jake from State Farm.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So we had a bit of a different approach. We actually we had a bunch of resources that we all used individually, and we tackled sort of different sections. So they all are interconnected, is the nature of the environment, of course. But I looked at snowpack and water. I believe Scott looked at forestry. Cam looked at sort of emerging trends in technology, and Ryan looked at biodiversity. And so we all wrote pieces on that and brought them together. And Erin actually, she went through it all and edited it all together into one narrative, put it together into a story in a sense. So it is one story from the perspective of I guess one person, but written by 4 different people. And we focus on Prince George, and we kind of do a little bit of brief backcasting, very brief, to kind of introduce the scene, and it talks about kind of our experience through the past 35 years in Prince George up until what things are like now in 2050 in Prince George. We used a lot of sources. So aside from the sources that we produced in the Google Doc, we did use about a dozen or so sources to kind of piece things together to kind of tell this story. So with that, Erin, I will pass it on to you to do the narration. And sorry for the scrolling back and forth. I forgot I was sharing my screen.
Yeah, don't worry about trying to scroll to keep up with me, Patrick. I have it pulled up on my phone here.
Excellent. Okay.
Awesome. So in the past 100 years, the planet has seen exponential growth in human activity. In the early 21st century, this exponential growth, known as the Great Acceleration, pushed the planet into a new epoch, the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene saw human activity as the dominant force in driving Earth's changing geology and ecosystems. Geological systems like the hydraulical cycle, which had been stable for millennia, were now under immense pressure. Freshwater made life on Earth possible and essential in food production and power generation, which drove the Great Acceleration, and we were running out. Back then, the scientists told us that human-caused climate change had warmed our region by almost 2 degrees since the 50s. It hasn't stopped. Since then, it has warmed nearly another 2 degrees in half the time. I remember being able to see the snow-capped Rocky Mountains in the backdrop of Prince George until midsummer. But in the 35 years I've lived here, I've watched the winter snowpack shrink to a quarter of what it once was and seen the shimmering peaks become ominous monoliths. Prince George and other communities in the Fraser and Peace Basins rely on the winter snowpack for water. As the snowpack has decreased, we've seen our communities dry up, and 50-year summer droughts became more and more common. There are no longer the winters that I remember as a child, where blistering winds once tore through the downtown of the city. There is now a late January rain that settles on the warped pavement. When summer finally comes, it is warm and dry. We watched for years as the Okanagan went up in flames and said the smoke from California would never reach here, but it did. Some say it's the fires of those dry months that have crippled our forestry sector, but those in the industry know better. The severe pine beetle attack southwest of the city, coupled with the failing mills in smaller communities, the fire brought what was inevitable, an end of Prince George as a timber town. Our awakening to this fact didn't come easily. Our economic structures that fed our voracious appetite for natural resources had collapsed, leaving our communities to fend for ourselves. There was initially little money left for public services, and the fires that consumed most of our province, due to the dramatic rise in the average global temperature, were left to spread the way nature had intended, ravaging communities in their wake up until the mid-2040s. We fought harder for the protection of what the remaining old-growth forests we had left, our main sources of biodiversity that help prevent the spread of wildfires in the region. After many years of conservation, we finally saw a string of consecutive positive return years for Fraser River salmon and sturgeon, and also our caribou are flourishing with the revitalization of lichen. Mitigating and adapting to 30 years of anthropogenic climate change has had a runoff effect on a number of aspects of Prince George's economy. The traditional model used by the forest industry has been decimated as a result of the invasive insect species, higher harvest costs due to shorter winters and wetter summers, and the proliferation of summer wildfires. The local camphor and pulp mill continues to operate, albeit under restriction. Between the lack of harvestable wood in the area and the summer smoke, it now runs seasonally and relies more on the wood debris left from larger operations. In a national campaign calling for closer partnerships between local communities and historically present industries, local First Nation Lidley K'nai adopted the site, indicating producing biofuel to service the Prince George area, sourced from pine beetle damaged wood. The K'nai today, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The Lidley managed forests and municipal solid waste, and is now sustained through managed forest, agricultural feedstocks, biodiesel, ethanol, and anaerobic digestion systems that have evolved. Political and social pressure has resulted in a number of economic interventions in favor of greening industries. A combination of carbon taxes, credits, and subsidies paved the way for a large-scale retrofitting of homes and businesses to more energy-efficient systems. The construction industry grew significantly to accommodate demand as older buildings were upgraded to utilize combined heat and power systems based on solar, biofuels, and natural gas. Traditional thermal storage units were converted to now widespread absorption thermal storage. That is to say, work doesn't exist in forestry, but it's changing and rapidly. There is more investment in silviculture, not of pine trees, but of spruce, cedar, and hemlock. If the stands can be kept from burning, they can be considered a carbon sink, an idea that is becoming more and more popular with each year. The overall composition of the economy is similar to that of 2020, but the diversity of its elements has changed. The percentage of the population employed in primary industries such as forestry and mining has continued to decline, while agriculture is beginning to grow. Employment in secondary industries such as manufacturing and construction has rebounded and continues to grow, and employment in service industries continues to constitute the majority of the economy. The Prince George of 2050 is once again a hub of government, health, and education services, But with the growing technology, energy, and manufacturing industries coalescing around a focus on biofuel generation and storage, we have a long way to go, but at least now we recognize that we are actually all in this together. Ta-da! Sorry for my butchered pronunciations of many things.
That was great. Nice work.
Yeah, awesome job, Aaron.
I guess I'll unshare my screen now. There, you guys can all have it back.
I'm just checking the chat. I love that story myself, just because of the way that you brought the biodiversity and the other elements together. Were there any I want to call them temptations? Did you guys argue about any other directions? Like, what could we say the basis of the economy is in 2050?
I could comment a little on that. We kind of, not so much like on individual things like the economy, individual trends, but like before we started writing and before we distributed the workload, we were brainstorming like the bigger trends. And we actually had like, we only focused on 3 in that paper. I think it was technology, the economy, and climate change, although some of us made references to other categories. But we originally had like 5, and we were completely going to originally focus on a different category. We had a socio-political category, and because we thought like that'd be a very interesting element to talk about. And I think Ryan kind of actually incorporated some of that, like in the form of decolonization. You know, that was the reference to Clayton Tanay. But yeah, so we actually had 5 major trends originally, and the other ones were social, political, and I actually don't remember. Let me see. I might have it up right now. Oh, and actually it was population, and I think I might have referenced population, but maybe it didn't make it into the end. I don't remember actually, but so yeah, we had more trends we were going to talk about, but we really wanted to like narrow it down. And so each of us focused more on a trend. So there wasn't really disagreement within the trends themselves. I think some of us wrote more narratively, whereas others might have wrote more, like I know mine was written almost more like a policy document, I think, but Aaron did a really good job of like taking these different writing styles and like weaving them together into one end narrative. So that was like a really great job, I heard.
Well, thanks, Cameron. I know initially we were talking about, we made the observation right away, like after the first meeting, where we're like, well, we have to decide on something, was that all the topics that we picked really fed into each other and supported each other and kind of commented on the subsystems within the greater one here of Northern BC and even Prince George.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a like in writing a story, you try to make it narratively coherent so that you can feel your mind doing this. You're trying to fit the, the thing that Aaron brought these things together. You're trying to make it coherent.
I think too.
It's an interesting demand of writing a story.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like we didn't really decide whether it was going to be positive or negative or neutral. So I think each of us took a different trend and went a different way with it. Like some of those trends were more negative, some were neutral, and some were positive. Like I talked about technology, and I think I actually kind of kept mine fairly positive, but well, how could you be positive about climate change, right? That's not really a fair thing for me to say. They were negative. But so that was kind of interesting too, is like, again, we didn't really decide on like a whole, like, okay, everyone's going to write like this. Everyone kind of did their own thing, and then we like weaved it together. And I think that actually works better because you get more of a, I don't know, like more of a pragmatic or more of an interesting document maybe.
Well, and if we had more time to do this, we could, like, thinking about the first group stories too, we could start to think about, how do some of these things more interact? How do, if you think about that, how are any of these things converging? She said, waving her water bottle around. Are any of them converging or any of them pulling in different directions? You can work on these for a lot longer. So I just wanted to point that out. So Patrick, is that a little hand?
Yeah, you can't really see it as well in here as you can in Blackboard, but yeah, there's definitely, it was challenging at the beginning about how to make these 4 stories fit together, and I think we came up with, like, the science is there, like the forecasts are there, they're based on science, so even if we all take a separate section and write about what that's saying, they're going to fit, because that is the narrative that the science is portraying. And it actually turned out, I think, a lot better than we had hoped. We were kind of like, this isn't going to work, like 4 different stories. I mean, a lot of that was Aaron's work stitching it together too, but they are all interconnected, like water and forestry, biodiversity are all connected. They're not in their own bubble, right? So when you start writing about the trends, it fits naturally, which helped. And then I think part of the finding the outcome, I mean, was that talking about making the changes or not, like, that is the uncertainty now, is do we in Prince George or in BC or Canada start adopting these new ideas and technologies and moving forward, or do we not? So this was taken, I guess, with the idea that these technologies, there are these trends emerging, and hopefully we actually start to do something with the technology available to us and making these positive gains. But yeah, it was interesting. I think we were nervous until we saw Aaron's finished product, and it was like, wow, that worked. Okay, cool. So yeah, it was fun.
Well, let me just put in a word for uncertainty here. We still have lots of uncertainty because we have the projections on climate change. There's a range, we're still kind of, we're not, there's not a high level of certainty. I guess maybe 30 years out is actually, they're probably tracking fairly well, but looking at exactly how those are just temperatures, and how are those going to affect living environments. So the first level of uncertainty is, what is that change on the landscape? Here, for example, do we go from a cedar hemlock forest to a ponderosa pine forest? Or who brings the ponderosa pines to the party, right? So there is a level of uncertainty about exactly how species will shift or adapt. And then there's humans. What are humans going to do? So there's definitely, there's a lot of dimensions of uncertainty. I just wanted to put a word in for that. So we're creating stories that are like this one. It's compelling, right? It's like, yeah, that's definitely how things could go. But I just want us to remember that we don't really know about my little timer. There. Okay, thank you. That we don't really know how the stories are going to go in terms of global migration and all those kinds of systemic interconnections.
Can I just say something really quickly as well, as part of the group conversations that we had? We actually at one point had seriously considered going down the avenue of decolonization, because in looking at how, we could talk about, a paradigm shift that's required to result in this sort of positive, resilient kind of story of a community in 2050, we seriously considered decolonization. But after we talked about it a little bit as well, and after I had thought about it as well, it's that uncertainty. It's like, well, how do you actually write about decolonization when we don't know what it looks like right now, when we're trying to figure out what it looks like right now, but also when it could possibly create contention with whatever it is that you decide to write. Like, oh, okay, so Clately gets their land back and they have authority over what happens on that land, and this results in this and this and this. Like, that can just sort of create contention amongst people in Prince George. And what would that look like in 2050 if there was a situation where land was given back? How would Prince George actually evolve with something like that happening? So to me, it just kind of became really challenging to think of how to write it, because I don't know what I actually believe could happen in terms of what I would like to see for decolonization versus what that would actually look like.
it actually raises to me this exact issue. It raises all kinds of questions in British Columbia, because the settler system, we figure we vote in a representative, and the representative, the administration, there's a lot of wrinkles in that system, but in some ways they're responsible to the voters. If First Nations has a territory, then they're responsible to 7 generations back and 7 generations forward, but are they responsible to settler voters? And how would that actually work out? And so actually, there's territories where where this has worked out in various ways, in the Yukon, or anyway. So it's a big challenge for many more settled places. Like, how would that work? And it'll be interesting to see what happens in Oklahoma, where they just had this court decision that the treaties are going to be enforced in Oklahoma.
That's exciting.
But so that'll be an interesting model, because apparently a lot of Oklahoma is already what they call, it's already tribal lands, but there's a lot of communities in Oklahoma that have settlers in them. So it's a very high coverage map for tribal lands. And so anyway, it'll be an interesting one to watch in the US context. Okay, so I better cede the floor here to group 3.
Hi. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Hello, hello.
Okay. I'm gonna try to screen share, so bear with me. I've never done this before.
Hi.
Chrome desktop share. And
I just want to say these are practical, real life, screen sharing. This is how we live now.
Okay, unlock. Okay, I think I've got, let's see if I can do it now. Okay. Chrome.
Just while you're doing it, Ryan Patrick, is your hand still up?
Okay.
It might have been, yeah. I think it's something you have to toggle, but it's not a new question. And I was just about to change it, but then the other screen popped.
Sorry.
That's fine.
So
how's that? Can you?
Well, I can see your screen.
Can you see the Zoom box rolling around that I'm moving?
No.
All right.
Are you talking about the part where your faces are?
Yes.
So if you could just, for me, that appears on a different part of my screen because I have 2 screens. So
okay.
I can see you now, and I can see the screen now.
But it's not blocking the PowerPoint at all.
No, not for me, because I have all these.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I will mute myself and off you go.
Okay. Sorry, I accidentally stopped sharing. 1 second. Let me get to the right. Where did it go?
Also, sorry, I don't have a webcam, but I hope this picture of my cat will suffice.
Okay. Hang on. I need to find the page again. Okay. There we go. Okay, and then share. Okay. Okay, I think I have it. Does that look, it's loading. Is that good? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna just introduce the background a little bit, and then we each have a kind of our own story to share. So what we decided to look at as a group is Prince George's food system, a day in my life, and we kind of picked an arbitrary date, but July 15th, 2050. And what we did, each of us is kind of sort of journaling, speaking to our lives as a person in the food system. So we have like farmers, distributors, producers, retailers, and consumers. So we each took a role. And the kind of, so the area that we focused on is like mainly Prince George and the service area around it. And then so on the, I guess that would be the left, is the Nechako watershed and reservoir. So you have the Nechako reservoir up here, which is a dammed area for hydroelectric production for some LNG, I think, or some stuff in Kitimat. And then it flows out into the Nechako River that's been diverted, and then across the whole rest of the water system, and then down into the Fraser here. And what we kind of drew from was looking at the Mount Polly tailings pond spill that happened in 2014, I believe, in just around Quesnel, which spilled into Quesnel Lake. And they're still feeling a lot of the repercussions of that tailings pond spill. So what we decided to look at was the Blackwater gold mine, which is south of Vanderhoof. And you can see in the map here, this is where the gold mine is in relation to Vanderhoof and Prince George. And then right just north of it, the Nechako Reservoir that feeds into the entire watershed. So the background for our world is in the Blackwater gold mine, is the Nechako Reservoir, and there in the year 2043 on February 7th, the tailings pond ruptured and had high levels of cyanide contamination, and this leached into the Nechako Reservoir. And because the rupture wasn't detected for a number of months, it contaminated the entire Nechako watershed with high levels of cyanide, which basically rendered any water, especially surface water in the watershed, undrinkable and unusable for agriculture. Because Prince George relies on partially the Nechako River for its water, but also it also takes some of its water from groundwater. Basically anything from the Nechako was rendered unusable in any way for the area, which limited the amount of water that people could use. So from that limiting of water, there's also an increased pressure on water supply because of the favorable conditions that are occurring in Prince George in 2050. We looked at some reports that talk to higher levels of precipitation throughout the Prince George region in the year 2050, but lower and more level changes in temperature in the area as opposed to other places, especially in southern BC, that we're seeing hotter, drier temperatures with less precipitation. So that caused more people to move to the area because of these favorable conditions, especially for growing. So with that increase in population, that also put a pressure on water usage. And so the regional district implemented a water restriction and water use licensing for the areas, especially to prioritize agricultural production. And through the regional district and municipalities, they also implemented a number of grant programs to support rainwater collection facilities, either municipally on houses or commercially and on agricultural facilities. So that's kind of our world in July 16th, I believe, 2050. So that's kind of the world that we're living in. And then we will go to the first person in our food system, which is Patrick.
Thanks, Hannah. I just have to minimize this screen here so it's not in the way. Now I can't.
Sometimes you can tuck it to the side.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, perfect. Just trying to see everybody else's. There we go. Anyway, so I took on the role as a farmer, and then let's talk about farming around Prince George, like 2050, 30 years from now. I kind of see, like, looking at all the data and information and trends and weather and how everything's going to unfold, like how this story is going to unfold. We're all actors in this real life scenario. It's like, this is more than just a project. This is our real lives. It's what it's coming down to, and keeping everything pristine, like, or try to get back to how things were, like in prior to industrialized revolution, that time frame. So I think it's going to be a blend of like futuristic farming, vertical, like all like water, nutrients, everything, and then some traditional too. Hopefully, we have traditional farming, and hopefully these are all our new green jobs. It's the foundation to all the different policies that we need. And anyway, I'm off what I've written. But I can like kind of spiel it off quick. The farmer has the most responsibility on his shoulders, making sure the farm and his crops has clean native organic water from the Chaco watershed and reservoir system. The chemical poisons from the processing of gold mining that's affecting the Chaco watershed and Blackwater gold mine site tailings is putting the whole freshwater system at stake, with major disruption in the freshwater system that runs into my First Nations community of Sycus First Nations, where my mom lives, and Vanderhoof, like the residents of Vanderhoof, and everybody that lives in between. It's like, you think about what we can do now, like we're at the start of the 30 years. So it's like, we got to set ourselves up really well for this hypothetical kind of scenario, but it really isn't. It's real life. So having a healthy ecosystem that sustains us, like nature and humans, hand in hand, farmer, land, water, sun, the earth. This is what we need. So thank you. Hannah, back to you.
So next we're on to Brody, who is our distributor.
Hi, everyone. As a distributor, it is my job to collect crop yields from farmers and bring them into food processing plants, private companies, and retail stores. One day while I was driving my delivery truck, I heard someone on the radio talking about how the Chaco River had become contaminated with high levels of cyanide. My immediate response was thinking of the thousands of fish and animals that will die over time from using the water source, not yet realizing how greatly this will impact myself and everyone else who relies on the river's water. A few years later, the contaminated water supply has left crop yields lower than ever before, hurting my business and leaving my family and I concerned about the future. Because of the low crop yields, I have not been able to transport nearly as much agricultural products such as grain, wheat, and barley. However, the demand for these goods continues to grow more and more as time goes on. Now, 10 years later, I'm still doing my deliveries. In order to continue my business, I have cut back on the number of trips I take with my truck. I only drive when I'm certain I can fill my truck to its limit, allowing me to continue to make a profit while also saving money on gas. This is not only economically beneficial to me, but is environmentally friendly due to my reduced fuel emissions. Thank you.
Okay, so I took the role as a food processor. So I kind of, mine's sort of formatted as journaling, talking about my experience as it. So back after the Chaco watershed got poisoned from the Blackwater mine, people got really scared about cyanide poisoning from some crops. Most of the fears were unfounded, as not all crops take up cyanide the same, but berries and tomatoes really took the brunt from consumers. Seeing as my main products I made were tomato sauces and jams I sold at markets and to local retailers, I had to change the products I sold. I had also, just before the tailings pond breach was discovered, invested in a new water bath canning equipment for my commercial kitchen. Once the regional district implemented water use licensing and restrictions, my water-intensive canning method was no longer a feasible business option. It's been 7 years now since my business plans had to drastically change, and times were tough for a while. I now use a heat canning method and have shifted most of my production to canned, pickled, and fermented vegetables and some fruits. Some people have started asking about making the jams and canned tomatoes again, as there are some farmers in the McMillan Creek watershed area whose soil was never contaminated and their berry crops are maturing and starting to sell tomatoes again. Seeing as more people have moved up to the area in the last 15 years, I'm grateful I was able to adapt my business to these changing times. And despite the disaster for our watershed, the whole community has really stuck together to support each other, including myself and my business. Even though the regional district just implemented more water restrictions, I believe through our tenacity and more with there being more grants for residential and commercial water collection, we can pull through these trying times together. So the next one is a retailer, which is Selena.
Hi, so I took on the role of a retailer, and so I created a plan when I found out about the Nechako contamination. My plan contains 3 objectives, which are profit, food security, and food quality. To ensure that these objectives were met, I used larger refrigerators and avoided spraying mist on the fresh produce, considering that the water was contaminated. Instead, I have implemented a rain collecting system on the roof of our building to collect rainwater for our misting systems. The water will go through a filtering process and is completely purified before touching our produce. This system will allow the fresh produce to be hydrated. To ensure that my customers are still receiving fresh produce, I've created a mobile app called Wonder Food Pickup. This app will allow customers to pre-order fresh produce and pick up in store. The app will contain a list of fresh produce and a schedule for when it is available for the customers to pick it up. I've also created a policy that requires unsold products to be given to the homeless shelters and food banks in order to eradicate food waste. There are set limits of vegetables and fruits that each family and individual can purchase in the food market, and that is to ensure that there is enough food for the community, considering that there's not a lot of food security, considering that the water was contaminated. Thank you.
Thanks, Nina. So then the last link in our food systems chain is the consumer, which is Kyla.
I'm the consumer, just your average dude who really loves buying food at the market. When the Nechako become poisoned with cyanide, there's a lot of uncertainty, confusion, and panic. Since most of our water comes from the Nechako River, our city had to instate immediate water use restrictions. Everyone was horrified about the environmental impacts from the Blackwater mine, but the city as well as businesses had to focus on what it meant for their jobs. For myself personally, I can't water my lawn or drink tap water. I've been using a water filter, buying bottled water, and using a water cooler to get my water for my own personal use. I haven't been able to grow anything in my own garden, but the food markets have also changed and it's become more difficult for me to feed myself and my family. We're limited in what we can buy each time we go, but to make things easier, we've been using an app that Wonderfood has released to make sure we get everything we need. For a while before this, local businesses and markets suffered harshly and produced less food than ever before. Stores began importing more food since local farms couldn't keep up the way they used to. After my local grocer implemented a rain collecting system to water their produce, they've started selling more and more. Things are definitely not back to normal. I've been more mindful of my food and water waste more than ever, and I've even started composting my leftovers. While things are definitely better, I don't know how long things can last this way, but maybe this can be the driving force behind our community becoming more sustainable.
Great, so that is a day in the life of a food system in Prince George.
Wow, you guys. I know we argued about this, but I really like, I really like what you've done. And that really, I mean, you know, I like how you constructed the backstory, you know, from what if something like Mount Polly happened.
Mhm.
in addition to the other things. Let's see what, cool to see a focus on water, food. And I was listening because I've, these lectures that I haven't posted yet online, they're about water, right? So what do we need, what are the human systems? What are the regulatory systems? So I was very interested to just hear you guys talking about that water system and seeing it through the different parts of the food community system.
So it was worth the fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Fighting's not all bad.
No. Constructive fighting, I guess.
Yes, Anna wanted this one bad. Your sword raised high. Yeah, it was good.
And I it's just sort of, throwing in that little wrench makes a neat scenario. The little wrench of poisoning the watershed.
Yeah, I did a bit of research, just like because I know there's like the Endako mine and the Blackwater mine. Those are the two that I know most of through the SAICA's surface water quality monitoring policy I was doing some transcribing for last year. And then just like researching about like what are the biggest contaminants that come from gold tailings ponds, which was the cyanide. So I kind of formed this scientific, and then using the reports to kind of indicate where people are coming from. So I mean, it could happen. Like the Mount Poly tailings pond spill is still really hugely in the purview of people in Quesnel, so it's not so far off.
Well, and there was just something in the news the other day about selenium from the Ajax mine near Kamloops, and that its effect on the water there. And then of course there's selenium and something else going cross border from the coal mines in southeastern BC to the US side. And here we still have old lead contamination from the trail smelter going over. That's still in the courts to the US side. So it's these things are part of our system, and that will come up in my lecture, like how can we attend to the security of our systems? How can we attend, how could we change our systems so that we're not taking the brunt of some of these risks? Because to me, it's a corporation taking the risk. We're going to do this and we're going to benefit from doing these actions. And then it's downstream users, drinking water users, agriculture. So anyway, it's really cool. This will be a great preview now, for my lectures. So anyway, thanks you guys.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to, there's a few more comments in the chat. Anybody else want to respond or ask a question?
I want to meet this cat that everyone was talking about.
It's Kyla.
Somebody was really excited about cats.
It's just how we all see Kyla. Okay. So I don't see more. I don't see anyone charging to the front to take over the Zoom presence. So group 4.
Present.
So how do you guys want to, notice you can share the screen. I don't know how you've decided to organize, but.
I could share the screen. We got a Google Doc going.
Okay.
If that'll, yeah.
I'll mute myself.
How am I doing? Everybody can see? Awesome. When we started out our assignment, we initially, like for the forecasts, we had said, okay, let's like find stuff related to Haida Gwaii, and we were very specific at the time. And then as we kind of got a better idea of what we were being asked, we kind of started to transition into more, okay, like let's look at scenarios for coastal and island communities. And we each kind of took it a different direction. We got a lot to get through, so in the interest of time, I'll just dive right in. Mine was energy transition. I remember back when the electricity going out in our small town was a communal thing. People would open their doors and look around, trading frowns. They'd be annoyed, but also relieved to see that they weren't alone in the experience. One or two people had fancy generators, but most of us didn't feel too jealous. They were so loud you couldn't even watch TV if you could, or you wouldn't even want to watch TV if you could. Stuff changes though. The outages don't happen too much anymore. Don't get me wrong, I don't miss it too much, but it was always down for just enough time to make you forget what happened at the movie you were watching. But it was nice to be reminded we were in it together, even if what we were in was crappy. The solar panels came in a couple months back. Everybody's got them up now. It took a long while to come in. We're remote enough out here that everything does. After a while, they even took down the old power lines. Apparently, it was always pretty expensive to fix that stuff, and with all the panels up, the money's just not there for something we don't need most of the time. We didn't have to pay too much for the panels. It was subsidized, or whatever the suits called it. When they told us we'd mostly be on our own for the batteries, none of us really thought much of it. A couple of the generator types really broke the bank on those, though. Turns out those were pretty important. We all have some sort, but they're nothing fancy. We don't really have those same outages from way back, but we sure have less power some days. When it's cloudy out, mostly is when you notice. Plus, you got to save a bit for night. Bernard's been telling the same joke for 4 months straight about it. He says it's called solar, not nighter. We're tired of laughing at it, but he brings us firewood when we're out, so it's a fair trade. When we put the panels up, we didn't think much was going to change. The bills did, though. We're saving a little. For most of us, not much did. The generator types are still living it up, online, plugged in like before. Everybody else had to pull back at least a little on that stuff, though. Until the batteries get cheaper, it just wouldn't work out otherwise. I thought we were just changing how we got our electricity, but we had to change how we used it too. At first, we were jealous. It didn't seem fair that the people with money got to keep going like normal, while the rest of us had to change. It's still unfair. It doesn't seem right that we got to change our habits and all, but not them. I started to feel a little sorry for them after a while, though. It looks like with the way stuff's moving in the world, we all got to cut back, change the way we do stuff. The way I see it, the longer you hold on to that stuff, the harder it is to let go. And then below, I've just kind of listed the kind of like the factors that I was trying to keep in mind. And then the source, which was heavily based on like Lurch's explanations of like solar and descriptions of like kind of his benefits, but also the drawbacks that he listed. I'll pass it over to Henry.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I wrote a chapter here on infrastructure that I'll read now. The low frequency sputter of the diesel trucks in town is definitely something that's changed. When I was a kid, I recall the number of big, dirty rigs cruising into town each evening as something of a daily pilgrimage here in the north. Loggers, mill workers, smelters, and the like would make their return home after a long day's work known to their families in that way. Today, although the jobs haven't changed too much, and neither have the local populations, the vehicular noise definitely has. Way back in the early 2020s, I believe, was when the provincial government started giving out grants to develop the electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the north. Since then, it has really taken off in a big way. It began with an explosion of people replacing their old daily drivers with Teslas in the 2020s. As competitors in the industry emerged, and the tragic death of Elon Musk in a space shuttle accident bound for Mars resulted in the collapse of the Tesla Corporation, a new sector in the industry took off. Now today, not only are people's daily drivers powered by electric motors, but the vast majority of industry vehicles and machinery are too. That includes the logging trucks. It only makes sense considering the generous tax incentives that were given to the companies who made the switch. As a result, charging stations are everywhere now, powered directly by BC Hydro. The prairie oil sands have understandably taken a huge hit, and the region's energy sector now heavily relies on the export of liquid natural gas to eastern markets out of Kitimat, BC. That's a region of the North Coast that has seen a significant influx of people the last few decades. As a result, new infrastructure projects have been ongoing in Kitimat and Terrace to accommodate the growing population. These include highways, roads, water infrastructure, electrical grids, housing, and commercial developments. Throughout the majority of the North Coast, however, infrastructure development has primarily been restabilizing roads and water mains to accommodate for our increased number of frost-free days up here and the amount of precipitation we experience each year. The combination of the two has made for some unstable times. Thanks, and I'll pass it over to Monica.
Yeah, so mine actually isn't like a first person or anything. It's just omniscient because I wasn't sure how to do it otherwise. But yeah, in the summer of 2050, certain crops are near impossible to grow, and the impact of climate change affects the security and wealth of food. The people miss foods such as wheat, canola, and barley that are essentially possible to find, and if so, only for the 1% in their secured greenhouses. More flexible foods have been established in regular citizens' diets, such as oats, blueberries, and green beans. The average citizen has to become more flexible with recipes as wheat is at a lower resource and higher expense. Oats have become more flexible with recipes. Oh, sorry, I don't know how to read. Oats have come to replace the wheat popularity, and gluten-free diets are all the rage accidentally. There is nearly no availability of room for picky eaters. Canning has become a common practice, and allergies are even more unfortunate situations, driving some families or individuals into unfortunate further hunger. As food supply decreases and jagged movements, the suspicion lays thick in the air. The crime rate has increased purely due to hunger, and people aren't the same anymore. Hunger drives those too impoverished to afford to eat. Pantry-related crimes are on the rise, and real-life Robin Hoods fall into play, as popular crimes mostly relate to the people's lack of needs met. Government fails to properly care for these situations, as prisons may be in play for those unfortunate enough to have committed these crimes, but prisons can't promise proper nourishment, and prisoners receive jobs in which they flush out fires and tend to agriculture for the nourishment and of community and other public health and safety matters, while not paying the prisoners accordingly. The prison unfortunately had to cut corners when it came to architectural funding, and therefore if it ever fell to natural disasters such as flood or fire, there is very little possibility of saving the home and workplace of the persons there. Annual production would have needed to be nearly doubled in popularized items such as cereal, livestock, dairy, and vegetable oils. It didn't, so people faced the consequences. However, items such as palm oil maintain themselves in high demand, which would continue the process of deforestation of the Amazon for palm oil, which further leads to climate change. There would be a consistent cycle of considering the demands of the public and the well-being of the public. People expect their essential needs to always be available because it was once available. However, complex ingredients, foods, now have certain adjustments that have changed the main components of original recipes, as many foods such as wheat are lessened in availability now. What is expected from the market is now past the point of agreement. Instead, consumers must compromise. Many farmers of British Columbia experience longer and harder crop harvesting wait times and have more natural disasters affecting their livelihood. Greenhouses and green roofs seem to lead certain practices as for the preparedness of floods. The professions revolving around the food and service industry are in decline and in some cases considered glamorous. Chefs are not always, chefs are not as popularized in wealthier homes, as people can't risk costing their rations to one extravagant meal. The Food Network channels and similar shows are now criminalized, as they cannot exemplify a waste of foods for competitive or decorative purposes. One of the most glamorous things in life is having a full fridge or a carton of raspberries. An Instagram influencer does a fridge tour for Snapchat. The Vogue interviewer groans in envy of the stocked fridge and pantry while asking where on earth they managed to find a supply for wheat, nonetheless to bake a cherry pie. Hunger is the new running joke of talk shows, and celebrities are canceled for going to flashing showmanship restaurants. Vancouver, a popular place for filming, received backlash for allowing certain food, flashy shows to be filmed there. Meanwhile, the lower class isn't able to maintain an average meal expectancy every day because the local government had originally refused to largely reinforce food security plans decades ago. Without the addition of poverty support, many experience hunger, consistent homelessness from climate disasters, and a further deep lack of basic human rights as these continue forward. Trapped by a poverty cycle and the need to spend each paycheck on basic essentials, people remain in this unfortunate situation of staying hungry. The water demand has increased for agriculture, livestock, and average use. The lack of action to reinforce and support clean water for all locations has affected communities in various areas surrounding British Columbia, and the population is demanding a full-scale investigation and system change to allow people to have access to clean drinking water. Some waters reek of sulfur, and people have grown tired of the insufficiency. The people are unhappy, and uprisings begin, calling for a safer planet, a safer home. Food security and health shouldn't be a wealth game, and people have demanded such. They begin crowding around the wealthiest homes and scale slowly down until everyone is equal and safe. The people wait in the dark, hunger stirring. Yeah, that's it for me. And on to Hannah.
All right, so I did mine on the fishing industry. So if you come from a fishing family, you know, when your family has been part of the fishing community for generations here on the coast of British Columbia, it's hard to separate that from any other part of your life. Everyone knows everyone. It's a tight-knit community. Even when I moved away for college in my early 20s, I found myself running into strangers who through at least one or two people knew my family, even if we weren't from the same coastal town. With all that's going on in the world, I've decided to visit my home. My parents managed to find ways to support themselves over the years so they could stay in this town they loved. I drive from my childhood home, past the crowds of tourists, to the emptier, less tourist-oriented end of what could be considered downtown of my small coastal town in BC. So much has changed since I moved away. This visit home has been almost entirely unrecognizable. All this used to be forested, and I can make the commute a 10-minute walk. I arrived at the small hidden beach area I visited so often with my family growing up. As I walked towards the calm waters, I felt the narrow dock, stilted on small logs that were covered in barnacles, squeak and shift the slightest bit with every step. It's definitely been longer than I thought. I stop at the end and let my fishing gear as my surroundings bring in waves of nostalgia. 1. Set up the fishing rod with fishing line, hooks, and bait. 30 years later, many things I remembered have disappeared. The smell of trees and the fresh catch of the day, the sound of waves hitting the dock and fishermen calling to each other across the marina early in the morning, and the endless trees that slipped into the ocean, only sparingly dotted by houses and snippets of road, were lost. I felt like a stranger in my own hometown. 2. Hook the line with your pointer finger, open the bail, and position yourself to cast the line. I remember overhearing my parents whispering wordly in the next room after dinner when I'd come home from college for Christmas breaks. It was always about how everyone was struggling, and as time went on, private conversations turned into the only thing anyone could talk about in town. I dreaded coming home after a while because the warm spirit of the community was seldom around like it was when I was a kid. 3. Cast the line when releasing your finger, letting the physics of your movement throw the lure far. The indigenous nations whose land we were on warned us countless times, but no one higher up seemed to listen beyond niceties for appearance. Studies also kept coming out, telling us about revenue drops and fish farms, heightening concern. And no matter how much we advocated for more accessibility and rights for local fishermen, the government seemed to give preference to commercial fisheries. Quotas were too expensive, all the fish were getting exported, and people were having to move away after the loss of jobs. I assume that's why my tiny fishing town had become a tourist spot, after almost everyone had to move away as private and offshore investors took over the industry, pushing us out. 4. Set the hook if a fish goes for the bait. Make sure you can feel the fish tugging and keep the line pulled tautly. This town is pretty far up the coast, but the overfishing that has been occurring made the fish migrate farther. It doesn't matter much now. Most of the fish sold here is likely not from Canada. The government is saying they're trying to reverse what they've done, but I'm not exactly sure how at this point. The fishing community out here is practically gone. My parents haven't seen some of their friends in decades. No one's really aspiring to be a local fisherman anymore either, even if it was affordable. I can't say there's a step 5. Nothing's biting. No surprise there. Maybe it's the spot, but it's probably just the accumulation of water pollution from pipelines, overfishing, climate change, so on and so forth. Here in BC, we used to be 20,000 strong in the 90s for fishermen, and now we're less than 2,000. The fact that I can go have a seafood meal in restaurants still mean that the fish are biting. There has to be hope. The only thing we need is to change who's casting. That's it.
All right, sorry, I don't have a webcam, but I did my topic on climate change and wildfires. 6 o'clock rolled around and my family turned the TV on to watch the news. We desperately waited for any updates on the wildfire spread circling the valley. In my gut, I knew that the wildfire would be closing into our city, but when it could happen, I had no clue. The news ended and we were left in suspense because there wasn't an update about our small city. I saw my old man get off the couch without a sliver of fear in his eyes. Pops was never afraid of everything. He called out, he said, "Kids, come outside to the patio and let's watch the sunset." I knew he was trying to get our minds off the fire, so I went outside with my mom. The sun was a deep red color and looked like the world was about to end. My mom was furious with the government because they couldn't control the amount of pollutants from fossil fuels being produced in the air. That wasn't the only reason she was upset. Her team of environmental scientists have traveled across Canada and the US, emphasizing the drastic temperature change over the last 20 years and their plan for building, sensing, responding, and learning to prevent these wildfires from happening. Some people would listen to her and others would brush it off like it was no big deal. As we sat outside for a short time, because of the bad air quality from wildfires averaging around 300 based on the AQI, every year the air quality levels keep worsening, with the air quality levels due to not having net zero carbon emissions. Pops looked up and said, 2 years ago, I put in place a resilience plan to protect our small town up north. Our city was the last in the project to take place and was never at a major risk due to this town, and you see it had natural resources like lakes, wetlands, and the breeze from the mountains around us. Over the last 30 years, the temperature has increased at an average rate of 0.07 degrees Celsius every decade, so the moisture from the wetlands have dried out. After that, it was just silence as we watched the sunset. We went back inside, turned the air cleaning filters on, and I walked upstairs, used my inhaler, which is common for everyone now. Then I wrote everything that happened in this town in my journal, and I went to bed. Looking back 10 years later, there was a slow and steady improvement over the years. Our city was rebuilt after the fire and life went back to normal. My mom's plan brought to light by our city, and the province and government implemented that plan to help preserve the environment. Air quality levels have improved due to the depletion of fossil fuels, and renewable resources have taken their place. The issue of climate change is still present, and learning from past mistakes have taught us to develop proper plans and strategies to keep for the world to keep improving.
Wow. Thank you for allowing yourselves to just go ahead and be first person creative for the most part. And Monica, for your darkness, holy Dinah. And so I just, I'm just sort of struck by some of the idioms you put in there. Like Sam's talking about the generator types, because if you're telling a story, I know exactly who the generator types are. Like I know who they are in my town. So that's to me an element of like a credibility in a story. And Hank, I liked so much how you sort of did that sort of budget challenge thing. And Monica, I'm going to remember pantry related crimes. That's my new crime category. I was attending a council meeting last night, and the RCMP officer was giving their list of crimes in the community and how many there were this year. But anyway, so far, that was not a category of crime, but I can just see it on the RCMP report. And Hannah, that was just so moving. Anyway, I'm pretty excited about this. And then Ali, I loved what you did too. There's something about the first person, don't you think? So I know I'm just saying wow. So, and there's a lot of wow in the comments. I think that the no from Cameron was this tragic death of Elon Musk, I believe. So I really think we all have a lot to just kind of think about. I'd like us to all give ourselves a hand. And I think we should just sort of, unless you guys want to start talking, I think we should end for today. And I'll get those water lectures up. And now I'm inspired to just inspired. So thank you. Oh, Patrick raised his hand. Patrick.
Yeah, there was something I was thinking about. I think we even talked about it too. There's been this talk about like this region turning into like a green belt. Sure, it's possible, but like reading some of the forecasts and stuff like that, it just doesn't make logical sense, because we're assuming that things are so hot and arid, and that the precipitation comes in events like downpours that cause soil erosion, flash floods, and all these things that are actually really bad and prohibitive of actually good farming. So it was just something like we talked about it too. Oh, hey, look, we're a new farming belt because of the temperatures, but that's only one aspect of it, right? And the fact is, like, long summer droughts
But people,
aren't prohibitive. Well, no, that's
I'm just gonna say,
it's a small detail. I'm sure like we can find ways around it, but it's like, oh, the temperature is rising. We don't have cold winters anymore, therefore farming. But it's like all the things that are causing those are also prohibitive of good
but
farming.
let me just say one thing, and then so I don't know how many of you have ever been to California. How many of you have ever been to the breadbasket of North America? Have you been to the Central Valley?
I lived there for 3 years.
Okay. Does it make any sense for the Central Valley to be agricultural? Because it has no water. So when you're thinking about what humans do, you have to think, okay, there's geographic attributes and scientific attributes, and then there's what humans do, and part of that is going to be in its advantage relative to other human places. So anyway, I need to run, and that's why I just wanted to, I'm going to cut you guys off. I know that's not really fair, but let's talk some more about this next class session, because I feel like this is kind of real for us, like Patrick said. So let's talk some more about it. Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you.